Tomorrow, he will come. Let's finish with her once and for all, Akudo was saying. Cheta giggled in response, sounding excited. Ebere's heart pounded. Were they plotting some new cruelty? That night, Ebere could hardly sleep. She lay on her thin mat, staring at the thatched roof shadows. Her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps Akudo planned to send her away to work for another family, or marry her off to an old palm wine tapper far away. The uncertainty gnawed at her. Ebere was a young girl living at the edge of the green hills of Umike. The thatched roof huts of the village nestled between lush fields and a winding river, a peaceful scene that hid the sorrow in her heart. After her father's death, life had become a daily trial. Her stepmother, Akudo, was a woman with a cold heart and a sharp tongue. Each day, before the rooster crowed, Akudo would rouse Ebere from her sleeping mat with harsh words. "Lazy girl, are you still asleep?" Akudo snapped one dawn, kicking the corner of Ebere's mat. The rising sun cast a dim glow through the hot small window as Ebere hurried to her feet. She knew better than to protest. Her stepmother's authority in the household was absolute now that father was gone. Akudo piled chores upon chores on the girl's slim shoulders. Ebere fetched the water in heavy clay pots from the river, tended to the cooking fire until her eyes stung with smoke, and walked the yam fields under the hot sun with little rest. All the while, Akudo and her own daughter Cheta lounged in the shade, chewing roasted corn and laughing. Cheta was Ebere's stepsister, a girl of Ebere's age but opposite disposition. Cheta was spoiled and idle, often joining her mother in mocking Ebere's tattered clothes or the simple braid she tied her hair into. "You will scrub the floors again. I see a speck of dust," Akudo demanded one afternoon, even though Ebere had cleaned the clay courtyard just that morning. Without complaint, Ebere knelt and scrubbed until her fingers were raw. She beat back tears, recalling how different life was when her father was alive. In those days, the hut had been filled with laughter and warmth despite their humble living. But since father's passing, warmth had been replaced by Akudo's bitterness. Ebere's father, whose name was Nnamdi, had been a kind farmer who taught his daughter to face hardships with hope. He used to say wise words to guide her. In moments of despair, Ebere remembered one of her father's favorite proverbs: "Patience has victory. The good things of life come to those who wait." Back then, she had barely understood, but now she clung to those words. Each day of suffering under Akudo's roof, she reminded herself to endure a little longer, believing that someday her patience and goodness might be rewarded. Despite everything, Ebere remained gentle and respectful. When Akudo shouted, Ebere answered softly, "Yes, stepmother," and carried on with her chores. When Cheta hid Ebere's threadbare shawl as a cruel prank on a cold night, Ebere did not fight her. She simply found an old sack to wrap around her shoulders for warmth. In the village, people saw how Akudo treated Ebere. Some felt pity and occasionally offered the girl a spare loaf of cassava bread or some plantains from their harvest. But nobody dared confront Akudo directly. She had a sharp, wagging tongue and influence among the market women. At dusk, after a day of labor, Ebere would sit by her hut threshold, gazing at fireflies blinking over the fields. Those quiet moments were her own. Sometimes an old neighbor, Mami Funaya, would shuffle by and pat Ebere's head kindly, whispering, "Chin up, my dear, the sun will shine on you one day." Ebere tried to believe it. She would muster a small smile and respond, "Thank you, Mama," before retreating inside to whatever meager supper Akudo allowed her. The season's harvest was approaching its end when Akudo decided that she had endured Ebere's presence long enough. One evening, as the sky turned orange with sunset, Ebere overheard Akudo speaking in low tones with Cheta by the cooking fire. Curiosity tugged at her, but she dared not to interrupt. She only caught snippets of their conversation. "Tomorrow, he will come. Let's finish with her once and for all," Akudo was saying. Cheta giggled in response, sounding excited. Ebere's heart pounded. Were they plotting some new cruelty? That night, Ebere could hardly sleep. She lay on her thin mat, staring at the thatched roof shadows. Her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps Akudo planned to send her away to work for another family, or marry her off to an old palm wine tapper far away. The uncertainty gnawed at her. She remembered Mami Funaya's comforting words and her father's proverb about patience. So, Ebere squeezed her eyes shut and whispered a prayer for strength, eventually drifting into a fitful sleep. At dawn, Akudo woke Ebere even earlier than usual. "Get up and make yourself presentable. We have important visitors coming," she said with a sly smile. There was an unusual brightness in Akudo's eyes that made Ebere uneasy. She obeyed silently, washing up quickly at the water basin and wearing her cleanest clothes, a faded blue wrapper and a blouse with patches on it. It was all she had, but she smoothed the wrinkles nervously. As the sun climbed, a knock sounded at the wooden gate of their compound. Akudo nearly pushed Ebere forward. "Go open it and mind your manners," she hissed. Ebere hurried to the gate and lifted the latch. Outside stood a tall young man with a humble stance. He wore a simple brown tunic and carried a bundle tied in cloth. His face was gentle, and he couldn't have been much older than Ebere. Behind him was an older man from the village acting as a guide. Ebere recognized the guide as Ogbuefi Udoka, one of the elders who often arranged meetings and introductions to Umuike. "Good morning," Ebere greeted quietly, looking from the stranger to the elder. Ogbuefi Udoka cleared his throat. "Good morning, my child. We are here to see your mother." I mean Lady Akudo." The elder caught himself, for everyone in the village knew Akudo was not Ebere's birth mother. Akudo swept into the courtyard then, with Cheta trailing behind her. "Welcome, Ogbuefi," she said politely, offering her hand for a greeting. Her voice took a sugary sweetness that Ebere had never had her use before. "And who is this fine young man?" The stranger bowed his head respectfully. "Good day, Mama. My name is Ozonna. I am from a distant part of the kingdom, near the farmlands by the western hills." His voice was calm and low. Ebere noticed he had kind eyes that briefly met hers before shifting away. Akudo's eyes gleamed with poorly hidden satisfaction. Yes, I've heard of you," she lied. Until yesterday, Akudo had no idea who he was, but Ogbuefi Udoka had informed her that Ozonna was seeking a wife. He had presented himself in the village market the day before, asking if anyone knew of a humble, good-natured girl he could marry. Word had reached Akudo's ears swiftly. To have Ebere off her hands, married to some poor farmer at the edge of the kingdom, was the perfect solution to her problems. She agreed at once to the meeting. They all sat on a wooden stools in the courtyard beneath the shade of a mango tree. Akudo, playing the gracious host, offered the guests fresh palm wine. Ebere's heart was spinning. It dawned on her what was happening. This young man, Ozonna, had come to seek her hand in marriage. Her throat went dry as she quietly poured the palm wine for the visitor, her hands trembling only slightly. She dared a glance at Ozonna as she handed him the wooden cup. He smiled politely in thanks. There was a curiosity in his gaze, as if he was studying her just as she was studying him. Ogbuefi Udoka spoke formally. "Ozonna here has come in good faith. He's a hard-working farmer and has heard of Ebere's virtues. He wished to make her his wife." The elder smiled kindly at Ebere, but she felt her stomach flip in anxiety. Sheta looked on from behind a pillar with a smirk on her face, clearly enjoying Ebere's discomfort. Akudo clasped her hands together in a show of delight. "What a fortunate proposal," she exclaimed. "Our Ebere is indeed of marriageable age, and I have raised her to be an obedient girl." Akudo shot a sharp look at Ebere, warning her to stay silent or risk displeasure. Ebere felt a chill despite the warm morning. Marry a man she had just met, and so suddenly. What she knew in her situation, her consent was never truly considered. Still, she gathered the courage to speak softly, keeping her eyes on the ground. "Elders, I am surprised by this. It is so sudden. Akudo cut her off with a fake laugh. "Oh, she's just shy. Elder, pay no mind." Then, in a lower tone, meant only for Ebere, Akudo muttered through gritted teeth, "Do not ruin this for me, girl." Ogbefiudoka coughed gently. "It's natural for the girl to be hesitant, but fear not, child. Ozonna has shown himself to be respectful, and he will care for you. Perhaps you two should speak privately for a moment to put your mind at ease." This suggestion surprised everyone, including Ozonna. Akudo's smile faltered, but she had no reasonable objection without revealing her eagerness to be rid of Ebere. She nodded stiffly. "Very well, Ebere, take our guest to the bench by the kola tree and talk. Not too long," she added, eyes narrowing. Ebere led Ozonna a short distance away near a shady kola nut tree at the corner of the compound. A wooden bench sat there, where her father used to rest after a day's work. She swallowed a lump in her throat at the memory and perched on the edge of the bench. Ozonna sat a respectful distance from her. For a moment, both were silent. Ebere twisted her fingers nervously. She dared to peek at him. Up close, she saw that his brown eyes were warm and curious, not the eyes of a cruel man. At least, he seemed a bit nervous too, which surprised her. Ozonna was the first to break the silence. "I apologize that this is sudden for you," he said gently. "Truthfully, it is sudden for me as well. I have been traveling for some time, looking for someone." He hesitated. "When I came to Umike, I heard about a young woman named Ebere, who is diligent and kind despite difficulties. I hoped perhaps it was true." Ebere's cheeks warmed with a shy blush. She had not imagined that anyone talked kindly of her. I just try to do what is right," she murmured. She gathered courage to meet his eyes. "Sir, is it true you want a wife? Why would you choose me, a girl with no wealth or status? I have nothing." Her voice almost broke saying this, but it was true. She had no dowry, no influential family. Ozonna gave a small smile. "Those things do not matter to me. I am only a simple farmer myself. I have a small home near the western hills and a piece of land. What I seek is a good partner with a kind heart." He paused, then added quietly, "I have seen how you behave in the market and heard how you treat your family with respect, even when it's hard. That told me you have a kind heart." Ebere was taken aback. "You have seen me in the market?" She tried to recall if she had noticed him before. Perhaps he had been among the buyers when she sold vegetables for Akudo. He nodded. "Yes. The day before yesterday, an old man's basket spilled on the road. I saw you stop what you were doing to help him pick up his yams. Many others just walked past, but you helped, even though the old man was a stranger. Your smile then, it was sincere. That was when I asked about you." His voice was earnest, and Ebere felt a small spark of hope in her chest. She remembered the incident. An elderly traveler had indeed dropped his produce, and she helped gather them. Akudo had scolded her afterward for being slow at the store, but Ebere couldn't have ignored someone in need. "I only did what anyone should do," she said, embarrassed by the praise. "That may be," Ozonna replied gently, "but not everyone does it. You told me enough about your character. He looked down briefly, as if echoing the words. I know this is an arranged matter. I must be frightening for you. If you truly do not want this, say the word and I will not force you. I will find another arrangement and trouble you no further. Ebere was surprised by his consideration. He was giving her an escape if she wanted it. She glanced back toward the courtyard where Akudo watched them like a hawk. Ebere knew if she refused, life under her stepmother would become even more unbearable. And looking at Ozonna now, his face open and sincere, she felt he was not a bad man. In fact, he had been kind in his words, a far kinder approach than she had ever expected for a marriage arranged by Akudo. Taking a shaky breath, Ebere answered, You seem kind, Ozonna. I will be your wife if that's what is arranged. She added in a near whisper, I will do my duty. Ozonna let out a breath as if he had been holding it. He gave her a reassuring smile. Thank you. I promise I will do my best to make this a good life for you, Ebere. They returned to the others. Akudo's grin stretched ear to ear when she saw by their faces that Ebere had offered no resistance. Without wasting any time, Akudo and Ogbuefi Udoka began to discuss the bride price and wedding arrangements. Since Ebere's father was no more, Akudo acted as a parent in the negotiations. Ozonna presented the bundle he had brought. It contained gifts for the family, 2 rolls of clothes, a bag of salt, and a small gold coin. Ebere's eyes widened. These items were modest by some standards, but still generous for a poor farmer. Akudo, however, tried to hide her disappointment that there wasn't a larger trove. Nonetheless, she quickly agreed on a token bride price. She was far more interested in speed than riches. By the end of the hour, they had settled everything. It was decided the marriage ceremony would be held quietly the very next day. There would be no elaborate feast or music. Akudo wanted to avoid spending money on celebrations for Ebere. Ozonna did not object. He too seemed content with a simple arrangement. The sun had yet to reach its peak when Ozonna took his leave to prepare his home for his bride's arrival. I will come for you tomorrow by midday, he said softly to Ebere before departing. She nodded, still dazed at how her life had turned upside down in one morning. As he walked away, leading a donkey laden with the gift he had to fetch later, Ebere felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity swelling inside her. No sooner had the visitors left than Akudo rounded on Ebere with a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Pack your things, girl. You leave tomorrow, she said, barely able to contain her glee. Cheta sneered at Ebere, adding, Better start saying your goodbyes to this place. Not that you had much here to begin with. Ebere glanced around the only home she had ever known. The dusty courtyard, the old collared tree bench, the hut with its cracked mud walls. She felt a pang of sadness. Despite the misery here, it was still home, and leaving to marry a stranger in an unfamiliar place frightened her, but she straightened her back and simply replied, Yes, stepmother. Akudo raised an eyebrow at the lack of protest. Perhaps she had hoped Ebere would beg to stay, so she could refuse. Instead, Ebere's calm acceptance robbed Akudo of the chance to lord her power one final time. With a huff, the stepmother turned and muttered about preparing Cheta's supper. That night, as Ebere carefully folded her few possessions, a couple of threadbare dresses, a comb her father carved from ebony wood, and a faded headscarf that had belonged to her late mother, her emotions swelled. Cheta watched from across the room with a pout, perhaps annoyed that Ebere was getting any attention at all through this marriage. In a rare moment of conversation, Cheta spoke. Well, at least you'll be someone else's burden now. Maybe I'll finally get new dresses without you around consuming resources. Ebere glanced at her stepsister. They had grown up together, but Cheta's heart mirrored her mother's cruelty more each year. I hope life is kinder to you, Cheta. Ebere said softly. Good night. She didn't have the energy for anger or resentment. Her heart was too full of uncertainty about tomorrow. Cheta rolled her eyes and turned away without responding. Soon, the sounds of the night filled the hut, crickets chirping and the distant drums from another village's festival across the hills. Ebere lay awake, her small bundle of belongings by her side. Her mind was a storm of worries. Would Ozonna truly be kind to her? What if this marriage only brought a new kind of suffering? She thought of her father and silently asked for his blessing and guidance. In her mind, she imagined him saying, "Be patient, my daughter. You have a good heart, and the gods know it. In the end, true character shines bright." Somewhere in the dark, Ebere finally found sleep, and in that sleep, she dreamed of hazy images, of green hills, of a hut far from home, and of a man with kind eyes waiting for her at a threshold. Morning arrived with golden sunlight and the chatter of birds. The village of Umike stirred early, and by midday, it was time for Ebere to depart to her new life. Akudo did not bother with any heartfelt farewells. She only oversaw the loading of a small wooden cart with Ebere's bundle and a few provisions Ozonna had sent as a courtesy. Some yams, dried fish, and palm oil for the journey. Cheta watched from the doorway, arms folded. True to his word, Ozonna came at noon. He led a simple cart drawn by a brown mule. He had also brought along another older man as a driver for the cart. This man, introduced as Chidi, greeted Ebere kindly and helped lift her bundle onto the cart. A few neighbors peered curiously from afar. They whispered about Ebere's sudden marriage. Some shook their heads in pity, believing she was being married off to a life of poverty and hardship. One or two, like Mami Funanya, waved at Ebere with a small encouraging smile. Ebere mustered a brave smile in return, though her stomach flustered with nerves. Akudo stood by with impatience. She had insisted Ebere wear a cheap red dress that once belonged to Cheta for the occasion, just so she wouldn't embarrass the family by looking too shabby. The dress was a bit loose on Ebere and faded from wash, but it was the best Akudo would allow. For herself and Cheta, Akudo had dressed in their finer wrappers to present an image of a well-to-do family handing off a daughter. Hypocrisy hung in the air, but Ebere remained quiet. Ebere climbed onto the cart. She turned to face her stepmother and stepsister one last time. She bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you for raising me, stepmother. May peace remain in this house." Her voice was sincere despite everything. Akudo sniffled and waved her away. Cheta just looked off to the side, refusing to meet Ebere's eyes. With that, Ebere stepped into the cart and sat on a small bench. Ozonna took a seat next to her on the cart, while Chidi guided the mule from the front. "Farewell," called Ogbefiudoka, who had come to see them off as an elder. The cart jolted forward along the dirt road, and Ebere watched as the only home she had known grew smaller behind her. She didn't know when or if she would see Umike village again. A mix of sadness and hope swelled inside her. The journey was not too far, yet for Ebere, it felt like entering another world. As they traveled westward, the landscape changed subtly. They passed rolling green hills that seemed to touch the sky, their slopes covered in thick bushes, and the occasional palm tree. The dirt road wound through farmland and patches of forest. Sometimes they encountered other travelers or traders. Ozonna would nod politely to them, and Ebere kept her head lowered modestly. After a couple of hours under the warm sun, they reached a more remote area. We are near the border of Umike and Umuoji Kingdom. Ozonna mentioned. Ebere noticed the path became less trodden, leading toward a stretch of land with fewer huts and more wild greenery. Finally, they arrived at Ozonna's homestead. It was a small clearing surrounded by tall plantain and banana trees, with a single round hut made of clay and thatched at the center. Beside it was a lane to shade for tools and a modest yam barn, just a thatched shelter to keep harvested yams dry. There was also a tiny garden where vegetables sprouted and a few chickens wandering about, clutching softly. A narrow stream glistened nearby, reflecting the midday sun, and beyond it lay more fields that stretched towards distant hills. "This is my home," Ozonna said almost shyly as the cart halted. Chidi hopped down and began unloading the few items. Ebere stepped down from the cart, her legs a bit stiff from the ride. She looked around, taking in her new surroundings. It was peaceful here, no nosy neighbors, no bustling market noise, only the rustle of the trees and the babble of the stream. It was humble, yes, but Ebere felt a small sense of relief. The air smelled of fresh grass and wood smoke from a cooking fire that had been prepared. Ozonna led her toward the hut. "I apologize, it's not a grand house," he said, perhaps reading her expression as she examined the simple dwelling. Ebere quickly shook her head. It's so lovely," she said softly, as she meant it. The hut might have been plain and worn, but it felt surprisingly welcoming. Inside, the hut had a single main room with a partition made of woven mat that separated a sleeping area. There was a bamboo bed frame with a mat and blanket, presumably where Ozonna slept, and he had set up a second sleeping mat on the other side of the partition for Ebere. The floor was swept clean, and there were clay pots neatly stacked by the wall, along with a couple of wooden stools and a low table. In one corner, a small window let in sunlight, illuminating dried herbs and peppers hanging from the rafters. Ebere felt tears prick at her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. The fact that Ozonna had prepared a separate sleeping area for her comfort showed his thoughtfulness. Many men might not have bothered, but he was treating her with respect from the start. Chidi finished bringing Ebere's bundle inside and handed it to her. "Nwada, welcome," he said kindly, using a term of respect for a young woman. "Take heart. This place will be your home now. Ozonna is like a son to me. He's a good man." Ebere nodded and offered a grateful smile. "Thank you, sir," she replied. She took her bundle and began to arrange her few belongings in the small wooden chest that Ozonna had cleared out for her things. Ozonna walked Chidi back out to the cart, speaking in low tones. He pressed a small coin into the older man's hand as thanks for his help. Chidi shook his head with a chuckle. "Keep it. I'm just happy you have found a fine wife. But I won't refuse, since I know you won't take no for an answer." With that, Chidi waved and drove the mole cart off, leaving the newly married couple alone. Standing outside the hut, suddenly both Ebere and Ozonna felt a little awkward. They were husband and wife by tradition, yet still strangers in many ways. The sun was setting behind the hills now, casting long shadows across the yard. The chickens clocked their way into a coop of woven sticks. Ozonna cleared his throat gently. "Ebere, are you hungry? I can prepare something for dinner." Ebere realized she hadn't eaten much all day due to nerves. "I can cook," she offered quickly. Cooking was something she knew well, and it would give her a sense of normalcy. He nodded, not offended. "All right, I fetched some fresh vegetables and I smoked fish. Let me show you." Together, they went to the small outdoor kitchen area, really just a fire pit with stones around it and a wooden table for prep. Ebere found a pot and soon set about making a simple soup with greens and fish, adding a little pepper and salt from the supplies. Ozonna helped by bringing firewood and blowing on the fire until it caught flame. They worked quickly, but it was a comforting quiet. Each of them unsure how to start deeper conversation, yet appreciating the cooperation. As the soup simmered, Ebere finally spoke, glancing at her new husband. "Thank you for preparing everything. I see you even set up a separate bed for me. That was very considerate. Ozonna gave a modest smile. I wanted you to be comfortable. I know this arrangement is unusual. I didn't want you to feel frightened. After a pause, he added, you can take your time to adjust. There is no pressure at all. Ebere nodded, stirring the pot thoughtfully. She was relieved. Clearly, Ozonna was not going to force intimacy or demand anything of her too soon. That night, they ate their first meal together, sitting on a mat outside the hut. The sky above was clear, revealing countless stars. A soft breeze carried the scent of night-blooming flowers. The soup is delicious, Ozonna said after a few spoonfuls. You are a very good cook. Ebere ducked her head with a smile. Thank you. I only learn by doing it every day. She hesitated and then added, I hope it will always be this peaceful here. Ozonna looked around at the tranquil night. It is peaceful most of the time, he agreed. Sometimes it can get lonely too. I have been alone out here for a while. His eyes were distant for a moment, which is why I finally thought of finding a companion. Ebere listened quietly. She realized she knew very little about him. Do you have any family? She ventured softly. He was silent for a heartbeat too long. They are far away. I wanted to make my own life, so I left to farm on my own. It wasn't the full truth, but he spoke with a note of sadness that made Ebere not press further. She simply said, I'm sorry. I lost my family too, my father, and my mother long before that. So, I understand a bit about being alone. Ozonna looked at her with empathy. I'm sorry for your loss. He gently placed a hand over hers for just a moment, a comforting gesture, then he pulled it back, respecting her space. In that moment, under the vast sky, Ebere felt the first seed of companionship taking root. Two lonely souls had found each other in a small hut at the kingdom's edge. Though their marriage was born of unusual circumstances, perhaps kindness and understanding could make it blossom into something true. Before retiring to the night, Ebere insisted on cleaning up from dinner, and Ozonna finally relented to let her. As she watched the pots at the stream by moonlight, she reflected on the day. To her surprise, she felt lighter than she had that morning. Akudo's house, with all its cruelty, was behind her. Here, she had a chance at a new beginning. Quietly, she vowed to herself that she would be a good wife, not out of fear or duty alone, but because Ozonna seemed deserving of kindness. He had treated her better in one day than her stepmother had in years. Inside the hut, they bid each other good night. Ebere lay on the mat staring at the thatched roof and listening to crickets chirp. She felt a strange sense of peace. Ozonna was just a few feet away on the other side of the partition, yet he might as well have been a world away, given the nearness of it all. Still, she felt safe. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a thank you to the spirit of her parents and to God above for guiding her through this day. Her last thought before sleep was hopeful. Perhaps, in this small home with a gentle young man named Ozonna, she would finally find a place where she belonged. In the weeks that followed, Ebere and Ozonna settled into a steady rhythm of life on the farm. Every morning, the roosters crow and the pink hue of dawn woke them. Ebere would sweep the hut and yard at first light, while Ozonna walked to the fields to check the yam mounds and the traps he set for wild rabbits. They would have a simple breakfast, often leftover porridge or boiled plantains, then walk side by side on the land. Ebere proved to be a hard worker and quick learner, though she had done chores under Akudo's roof. Working freely in her own home gave her a new energy. She helped plant vegetables, weed the small cassava plot, and carry baskets of yams from fields to barn during harvest. Ozonna would sometimes protest when she lifted something heavy, concerned she might strain herself. But Ebere only smiled and continued. I am stronger than I look, she assured him one day as she balanced a basket of yams on her hip with ease. They often shared laughter over simple things. One afternoon, Ozana attempted to climb a palm wine tree to tap fresh palm wine, but ended up scrambling down quickly when a curious lizard startled him. He landed on the ground with a thud, and Ebere rushed over, worried he was hurt, only to find him bursting into laughter at himself. She couldn't help but laugh too, relieved he was safe. Moments like these turned the awkwardness between them into friendship and budding affection. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit outside the hut to enjoy the cool breeze. On one such night, they watched fireflies blinking across the field like falling stars. Ozonna told Ebere about the constellations he had learned to identify in the sky. Ebere listened, fascinated. Her life before had rarely afforded time for strategizing or gentle conversation. In turn, she shared memories of her father's stories about the village ancestors and heroes. As the days passed, Ebere realized she no longer felt like a stranger in this place. The hut and farm had become her home, and Ozonna's company was becoming a source of quiet joy. She found herself humming while she walked, and Ozonna, hearing this, often smiled to himself. However, life was not without challenges. One hot afternoon, a dry wind blew from the north, heralding an unexpected drought. Days went by without rain. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the little stream by their home thinned to a trickle. Ebere and Ozonna conserved water, drawing only what they needed for cooking and a quick wash. They carried water from a further river when the near stream couldn't provide enough. The crops suffered, leaves withered, and the soil cracked. Despite this hardship, Ebere did not complain. She toiled alongside Ozonna to save as many plants as they could, watching them in the cool of evening and early morning to reduce evaporation. One night, after a particularly long day trying to dig a small well, Ozonna sighed heavily as they sat down to eat a sparse meal of yam and bitterleaf soup. He looked around the dimly lit hut and then at Ebere, guilty evident in his eyes. "I am sorry, Ebere," he said quietly. She paused, raising her eyes from her bowl. "Sorry? For what?" "For bringing you into such a difficult life," he said, voice heavy. "You had hardships enough under your stepmother, and now here you are, struggling again just to get by. I promised to do my best to give you a good life, but I can't even make the rain fall." The frustration and worry were clear. He feared failing her. Ebere's heart ached at his self-blame. Without thinking, she reached over and took his hand gently. "Ozonna, you have nothing to apologize for. This drought is not your fault. We are in this together." She managed a reassuring smile despite her own tiredness. "You work so hard. I see it every day. And I am happier here than I ever was in Umike, hardship and all." He looked at her in surprise. "Truly?" She nodded. "Truly, here I am treated with kindness and respect. We may not have wealth or comfort, but we have peace. To me, that's worth everything." She gestured around the small hut. "I know we have little, but my father used to say that a poor man's goat is his cow, meaning we must cherish whatever we have. I cherish this life we have, however modest it is." Ozonna absorbed her words. "The poor man's goat is his cow," he repeated thoughtfully, the proverb rolling off his tongue in English. Its wisdom sinking in, he squeezed her hand with gratitude. "Your father was a wise man, and you have his wisdom in you, Ebere." Her cheeks warmed at the compliment, but she shook her head. "I just know what it's like to have nothing, yet still find small joy," she said softly. "We have food for tonight, we have a roof, and we have each other's goodwill. That's more than many have." Her words lifted Ozonna's spirits. In that moment, under the dim glow of the oil lamp, with their hands briefly joined, something shifted between them. The bond of trust and affection grew stronger, nurtured by mutual respect and understanding. The rains eventually returned a week later, quenching the thirsty land. The stream swelled again, and the wilting crops perked up. Ozona and Ebere rejoiced like children when the first raindrops fell, dancing in the shower outside their hut. They laughed as they got soaked. The cool rain washed away their worries. It was a small victory against nature's challenge, and they had faced it together. But another trial soon came, one that really tested their devotion. As the season changed, a sickness crept through the countryside. Some neighboring farmers from a distant hamlet fell ill with fever and chills, malaria fever. The traveling herbalist called it. Despite trying to ward off mosquitoes and drinking boiled herbs as precaution, Ozona succumbed to the fever one humid evening. It started with him shivering at dusk. Even though the day had been warm, Ebere noticed at dinner that he was barely eating. He brushed it off, saying he was just tired. By midnight, Ebere awoke to the sound of wretched breathing. She lit a lamp and found Ozona sweating and curling up on his mat, teeth chattering in chill. His skin was hot to the touch. "Ozona!" she exclaimed softly, kneeling beside him. His eyes opened, glazed with fever. I'm all right," he mumbled, clearing not. Ebere felt a surge of panic. She had nursed her father through a similar fever years ago, but he had not survived it. She refused to let those dark memories paralyze her now. Quickly, she fetched water and soaked a cloth to place on Ozona's forehead. His condition seemed to worsen through the night. He alternated between shivering and sweating, murmuring in his restless half-sleep. Ebere stayed by his side, spoiling his face, urging him to sip water. When dawn broke and Ozona's fever still raged, Ebere knew she needed help. There was a medicine man in a larger village a few miles away. Without hesitation, Ebere changed into her sturdier sandals and prepared to go seek medicine. Ozona, in a brief lucid moment, caught her hand weakly. "Where are you going?" he croaked. "I will go get herbs to break your fever," she said, trying to sound calm. "You'll be alright, just hold on." He shook his head feebly. "It's too far, and you shouldn't go alone." Ebere managed a reassuring smile and gently squeezed his hand. "Hush now, I'll be safe. And neighbor Dike from across the stream. He can accompany me part of the way." She had already decided to stop by the nearest farm to ask their neighbor to escort her to the main road. Before Ozona could protest further, Ebere gave him more water and tucked the blanket around him. "I'll be back as soon as I can. Please rest," she whispered. The morning sun had just risen as Ebere set out. Her heart pounding with worry, she stopped by Dike's small hut, an elderly farmer who lived about half a mile downstream. True to the kind nature of rural folk, when he heard of Ozona's illness, he agreed at once to accompany Ebere to the main village and help however possible. They walked briskly along the dirt path for over an hour until they reached the village where a known herbalist, Okoye, had his stall. The herbalist was a wizened man with bright eyes. He listened carefully as Ebere described Ozona's symptoms: high fever, chills, likely the marsh fever. He confirmed. He quickly mixed a bundle of leaves and roots, bitter kola, neem tree bark, and other medicinal herbs into a pouch. Boil this in water and have him drink it twice a day, he instructed. He also handed her a small clay vial. Crush these dried leaves into a powder and mix with water for him to drink if the fever spikes again. It will help bring it down. Ebere thanked him profusely and paid him what money she had. It was a small sum that Ozona had set aside, plus a few coins Ebere had secretly saved from selling some garden vegetables in the market. The herbalist, seeing her worry, added a few extra leaves at no charge. Dike helped Ebere hurry back as fast as her legs would carry her. By the time she returned home, it was near midday. She was exhausted and soaked in sweat from the journey, but she did not rest. At the door of the hut, she found Ozona half conscious, trying to stand, perhaps searching for her. He had dragged himself to the doorway and looked ready to collapse. Ebere rushed to him, wrapping her arms around to support his weight. I'm here, she panted, guiding him back to the mat. He was burning up, murmuring her name in confusion. Ebere's eyes stung with tears, seeing him so helpless, but she steeled herself. She had to be strong now. She got to work immediately, boiling water and steeping the herbs as instructed, the hot filled with a sharp medicinal smell. She managed to get Ozona to drink the bitter concoction, coercing him gently even as he grimaced at the taste. Throughout that day and into the night, Ebere kept vigil. She sponged his body with cool water when the fever peaked and held his hand when he shivered with chills. She prayed quietly over and over for his recovery. At one point, moments later in the night, Ozona opened his eyes and found Ebere sitting beside him, wiping his brow with a damp cloth. Her eyes were heavy with fatigue, but she offered a tired smile when she saw him awoke. In a hoarse whisper, he said, You stayed? Ebere felt a tear roll down her cheek at hearing his voice lucid again. She quickly brushed it away. Of course I stayed. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered back. She realized she was holding his hand firmly. Rest now. You will be well. His fingers weakly tightened around hers. Thank you, Ebere, he managed before drifting off again, the herbal portion easing him into a more peaceful sleep. It took 3 days for the worst of the fever to break. During that time, Ebere scarcely slept. She ate little, only when Dike's wife sent over a warm meal and insisted Ebere keep up her strength. All Ebere cared about was nursing Ozona back to health. On the third night, his temperature finally lowered to normal and his breathing became steady. Then, when he woke that next morning, the fever had passed. He was weak but alert and alive. Ebere cried in relief when he realized he was out of danger. Over the next few days, she continued to tend to him, making sure he drank the herbal tonic and feeding him soft porridge. As his strength returned, Ozona was quiet and thoughtful, watching Ebere move about with gratitude shining in his eyes. One evening, after eating a small meal, he spoke softly. I heard your voice while I was ill, he said. I felt your hand holding mine. It kept me anchored here. Ebere looked down shyly. I was so afraid I would lose you, she admitted in a trembling voice. Ozona reached out and gently lifted her chin so their eyes met. You saved my life, he said, emotion heavy in his tone. I wouldn't be here if not for you, Ebere. She started to protest, but he continued. No, it's true. You risked yourself running for medicine. You never left my side. You gave me strength to fight. I can never repay you for that. Ebere shook her head, tears gathering. You don't need to repay me. I did it because you're my husband and my friend, and I care about you. The last words came out barely above a whisper. And I care about you deeply, Ozona replied, his eyes shining. It was the first time either of them had openly confessed the depth of their feelings. He gently took her hand, the very hand that had comforted him through fevered night, and pressed it to his lips in a gesture of pure respect and affection. Ebere, you have shown me more love and loyalty in this month than I ever imagined possible. I am truly fortunate to have you as my wife. Ebere felt her heart swell. In all her life, she had never had such sincere praise directed at her. She realized then that the quiet fondness she felt for Ozona had grown into love. The kindness in his voice, the warmth of his hand holding hers, it all felt like home. Under the gentle light of an oil lamp, in that humble hut, Ebere and Ozona embraced each other tenderly for the first time. It was not just the embrace of duty-bound spouses, but of two people who had found love in the unlikeliest of places. Ebere rested her head against his shoulder, and he stroked her hair softly. They stayed like that for a long while, content in the silence and in each other's arms. Outside, the crickets sang their nightly song, and a cool breeze rustled the banana leaves. The worst of their trials had passed, and their bond was now unbreakable. Neither riches nor poverty mattered in the moment. What they had was a genuine love built on kindness, sacrifice, and trust. The morning sun was shining brightly the day fate intervened and changed Ebere's life forever. By now, several months had passed since their wedding. Ebere and Ozona's life had settled into a happy routine after surviving illness and drought. On this particular day, they decided to make a trip to Umike village. Ozona suggested it gently over breakfast. "You haven't visited your father's grave since you left," he said. "Perhaps we can go pay respect and also greet the villagers. I know you might want to see Mame Funanya and others who were kind to you." Ebere was touched by his thoughtfulness. "I would like that," she admitted. A part of her also wanted to show the village that she was alive and well, maybe even to let Akudo and Cheta see that she was not living in misery as they might have hoped. Though Ebere harbored no revenge in her heart, she did feel a quiet pride in how far she had come. They set out mid-morning, walking hand in hand along the road back to Umike. The journey was shorter by foot than it had seemed by cat. With their newfound closeness, the walk felt pleasant. Ozona led their mule carrying a basket of fresh produce they planned to give to some villagers. Ebere carried a small clay pot of palm wine she had brewed as an offering for her father's grave. When they reached Umike, villagers who remembered Ebere greeted her with surprise and delight. She looked healthy and content, quite different from the timid, downtrodden girl they recalled. A gaggle of women at the market whispered that marriage must have been treating her well. Ebere humbly thanked those who asked after her and introduced Ozona as her husband. Many gave Ozona nods, though a few regarded his simple clothes and concluded he was indeed just the poor farmer they had thought. Nevertheless, his gentle manners impressed them. They went to her father's grave first, a small mound under an iroko tree just outside the village. Ebere knelt and poured a little of the palm wine libation on the earth, silently speaking to Nnamdi's spirit, telling him she was alright and that she had found happiness. Ozona stood respectfully behind her, giving her time. Unknown to them, a rumble of hoofbeats was approaching the village from the opposite side. A band of horses rode into Umike, kicking up dust. At their head were several men clad in the purple and gold livery of the kingdom of Umuji. They were obviously royal soldiers or messengers carrying the insignia of the royal house. Villagers turned their heads in awe and confusion. It was rare to see such a sight in their humble community. Akudo was in the marketplace haggling over fabric and Cheta with her when she noticed the commotion. Cheta tugged her mother's arm, pointing at the riders. They watched as the soldiers dismounted. One of them unfurled a scroll and loudly addressed the market crowd. "People of Umike, we seek a man named Ozona. He's tall, young, and was last seen in this region. It's urgent that we find him." Akudo's heart nearly stopped. "Ozona?" she repeated to herself. Cheta gasped, recognizing the name of Ebere's husband. Why would royal soldiers be seeking a poor nobody like him? Meanwhile, Ebere and Ozona had finished at her father's grave and were making their way back into the main village path, holding hands. They noticed a gathering crowd and heard the distant voice of a soldier calling a name, Ozona's name. Ozona immediately tensed. Ebere felt him squeeze her hand. "Those are soldiers," he said under his breath, eyes narrowing as he spotted the purple and gold uniforms through the crowd. His mind raced. He had known this day might come, but perhaps not so soon and not here. Before Ebere could fully grasp what was happening, the soldiers turned and saw the couple at the edge of the crowd. One officer, a tall man with a ceremonial sword at his side, stepped forward briskly. He studied Ozona, then dropped to one knee with head bowed. "Your Highness," he exclaimed, "we have found you at last." A collective gasp rippled through the villagers. "Highness?" some murmured, all eyes suddenly on Ozona and Ebere beside him. Akudo and Cheta stood not far off, looks of shock frozen on their faces. Akudo's hand flew to her mouth. Could this simple young man she had married her stepdaughter off to be royalty? Ebere was oddly confused. She looked at the soldier kneeling before Ozonna and then at her husband, who stood stiff and conflicted. What's the meaning of this? She whispered, her heart pounding wildly. Ozonna gently let go of her hand and took a half step forward. Rise, Obiora, he said to the soldier quietly. The soldier obeyed, standing respectfully. Ozonna's voice was calm but carried a new authority that Ebere had never had before. He addressed the group of soldiers. I see my father has sent you. I hope all is well in Umoji. The officer named Obiora nodded, relief evident on his face. The king has been worried, my prince. He sent us to search for you. The king is ill, not gravely, but he has asked for you. And also, here the officer glanced curiously at Ebere, unsure who she was. We had news in neighboring villages that you had taken a wife in your travels. The king said if it were true, we were to bring her as well under royal protection. Ebere's eyes widened. Wife, prince, king. The words swelled in her head. She turned to Ozonna, her voice barely a breath. Prince? They are calling you prince. Ozonna turned to face her fully. He looked profoundly apologetic and took her trembling hands in his. The crowd and soldiers respectfully gave a few steps of distance, but everyone strained to hear. Akudo and Cheta were at the front now, eyes glued to the scene. Ozonna spoke softly, his voice meant for Ebere, but audible in the quiet market square. Ebere, I'm sorry I didn't tell you before. My full name is Prince Ozonna of Umoji, son of King Ifechi. Ebere felt the word tilt. She had to steady herself. Prince, her husband, this kind humble man, with whom she had built a life, was a prince of a great kingdom. She looked at his face, searching for any sign of deceit, but she saw only love and concern there. Everything I told you about wanting someone to love me for me, not for title, that was true. Ozonna continued earnestly. I came in disguise to find a wife who could love a simple man, and I found you. I never meant to hurt you with this secret. I was going to tell you. Ebere's mind flashed through the past month. His occasional evasiveness about family, the way he had enough coins for bride price and medicine despite claiming to be poor, the manner in which he carried himself with quiet dignity. It all made sense now, yet it was so unbelievable. He felt a surge of emotion, astonishment, a bit of a hurt at being kept in the dark, but also an overwhelming awe at the situation. She realized her hands were shaking in his. Ozonna, I don't even know what to call you now, she stammered softly. Ozonna, he said firmly. To you, I will always be Ozonna, the man you married and love. The prince part of me, I hope you can accept that it's the same person. I'm still me. Ebere looked into his pleading eyes, and despite everything, she managed a faint, trembling smile. You are still the man I love, she whispered, voice cracking slightly. She swallowed hard and found strength in her heart. I need a moment to understand. Obiora the soldier stepped forward gently. My lady, he addressed Ebere cautiously. Forgive the shock. We only reveal this because time is of the essence. The king requires the prince's return swiftly. But be assured, if you are his wife, you are under our protection as well. Ebere gave a polite nod to the soldier, hardly able to find words. She glanced over his shoulder and saw in the crowd her stepmother Akudo's face contorted in disbelief and something like regret. Cheta stood beside Akudo, eyes wide and mouth slightly open, utterly speechless for once. Murmurs began surging in the crowd. Ebere's husband is a prince of Umoji. She's a princess. Our Ebere from this village, royalty now. Many eyes turned to Akudo. Some women smiled, recalling how cruelly Akudo treated the girl. There was a sense of poetic justice in the air. Akudo stepped forward, pushing through. She attempted a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Your Highness, I mean Ozonna," she stuttered, bowing clumsily. "And Ebere, my dear stepdaughter, what a surprise." Her voice was shaky. One could tell she was attempting to curry favor, realizing Ebere now stood far above her in station. Ozonna's expression turned cool as he regarded Akudo. He had heard of her harsh treatment of Ebere. Still, he kept his tone civil. "Lady Akudo," he acknowledged curtly. Akudo wrung her hand. We had no idea you were such an important man." "If we had known." Ebere stepped forward now, finding her voice. She stood straight, a new confidence coming from the truth revealed. "It would not have mattered if you knew," she said quietly, cutting off Akudo's words. "You treated me poorly because you saw me as worthless. Now you see strangers bowing to my husband, and you are ready to treat me well? Character should not depend on wealth or status, stepmother." Some villagers murmured approval. Akudo's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she bit her tongue, aware that Ebere had powerful allies now. Seeing the tension, Ozonna placed a gentle hand on Ebere's shoulder. He addressed Akudo and Cheta with a polite but firm tone. "Ebere bears you no ill will, despite everything. But we must leave now. The king awaits us in Umoji." Cheta finally found her voice and blurted, "Ebere, please, remember us when you are in the palace." It wasn't exactly an apology or congratulation, more a plea not to forget them now that she was elevated. Cheta's eyes were shining, possibly with envy or regret. Hard to tell. Ebere regarded her stepsister. She simply said, "I wish you both well. Goodbye." There was kindness in her voice, but also finality. Before turning away, she spotted Mami Funaya in the crowd, smiling broadly with tears of joy in her eyes. The old woman lifted her hands in blessings. "Go well, my daughter. Your father's spirit must be dancing now," she called out. Ebere gave a grateful smile to the elder for her unwavering support. The lead officer, Obiora, motioned to another soldier who brought forth 2 fine horses, likely spurs they had for travel. He bowed to Ozonna. "Your Highness, we have a horse ready for you and one for the lady if she wishes to ride, or she can ride with you." Ozonna helped Ebere onto one horse and then mounted his own. Seeing that she seemed steady enough, in truth, Ebere had never ridden a horse before, but adrenaline and determination steadied her. The villagers parted to make way as the soldiers formed a protective escort around the prince and his wife. As they prepared to depart, Ozonna looked at Ebere with concern. "Are you alright?" he asked gently. She took a breath and nodded. Though her mind was still reeling, she felt an excitement and resolve building within her. "Yes, my prince," she answered softly, a hint of teasing in her tone, so she wasn't angry with him. He smiled, relief in his eyes. With a final glance at the village of Omike, at Akudo's stern face, at the humble huts and fields, Ebere realized this chapter of her life was closing. She had risen from those dusty paths to a destiny she never imagined. The villagers cheered and waved as the royal horses trotted off. Even those who once pitied her now looked at her with pride and astonishment. As they rode out, the wind carried the sound of the village youth singing a song of farewell and triumph. Ebere's eyes welled with tears, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming emotion. She reached for Ozonna's hand across the space between their horses, and he squeezed it reassuringly. Against the backdrop of the green hills of Umike, Prince Ozonna and Ebere rode toward their new future, and in the center of the village, Akudo slumped to the ground in disbelief, left to swallow the bitter truth that the girl she had treated like a death had become a jewel exalted by faith. The journey to Umoji took the rest of the day, and in the night the soldiers led the way with torches once darkness fell. Ebere rode close to Ozonna. The two often exchanged glances of amazement at how swiftly life had changed that day. As they crossed the boundary into Umoji's lands, Ebere's heart pounded with anticipation and nerves. She had never been beyond her own village outskirts, and now she was heading to a royal city as a prince's wife. They paused by a riverside camp briefly to rest the horses and allow Ebere a moment respite. Ozonna insisted she drink some water and eat a little roasted yam a soldier offered. He himself barely ate, too eager to reach his father. Throughout the ride, whenever they had a private moment, he would quietly ask Ebere how she was feeling, if she was comfortable, if she needed anything. Each time, Ebere smiled and assured him she was fine. Truthfully, she was running on excitement and could hardly feel tired yet. Under the silver light of a crescent moon, the entourage approached Umoji's capital town. Ebere saw the large houses and eventually the outline of a grand palace compound atop a hill, lit by many torches and lanterns. It was a magnificent sight, unlike anything Ebere had seen. High walls of red earth and stone, with an ornate gate, and behind it, the peaked roofs of multiple large huts and halls, some 2-story tall. It was as if a piece of a storybook had come to life. As they neared the gate, a trumpet sounded from the watchtower. The soldiers at the gate recognized Prince Ozonna immediately from the escort and flung the gates open. "The prince has returned!" a guard called out. Servants and attendants came rushing, bowing as Ozonna and Ebere dismounted in the wide courtyard. Ebere suddenly felt self-conscious. Her dress was travel-stained and simple, her hair loosely tied back from the long ride. She certainly did not look like a princess, but Ozonna was by her side in an instant, taking her hand as a steady anchor. An elderly man with a richly embroidered robe hurried out from one of the palace doors. He had the same kind eyes as Ozonna. Ebere realized this must be King Ifechi, Ozonna's father. Though aged with grey in his hair, he held a regal air. Walking beside him was a graceful, middle-aged woman with a worried expression, likely Queen Mother Nnenna. Ebere's heart fluttered, intimidated to meet them. Ozonna let go of Ebere's hand and just long enough to approach his father and bow briefly out of respect before embracing him. "Father," he said warmly, "I'm sorry I have caused you worry." The king embraced his son tightly, relief plain on his face. "My son, you are safe. That's what matters." He pulled back and gave Ozonna a fond, exasperated look. "You gave us quite a scare, disappearing like that." Ozonna gave an apologetic smile. "I had to be sure, father, to find what I was looking for." The queen stepped forward and cupped Ozonna's face. "We are just happy you are well, my son," she said, tears in her eyes. Then the royal couple turned curious gaze to Ebere, who stood a few steps behind, unsure of protocol. She quickly went to her knees and bowed her head in respect, as one would do to elders and royalty. Ozonna gently reached out and raised her up. "Father, mother," he said with clear pride in his eyes. "This is Ebere, my wife." He took Ebere's hand, and she felt reassured by his touch. King Ifechi and Queen Nnenna exchanged looks of surprise. They had perhaps thought the rumors exaggerated, but here was a young woman their son had indeed married in his travels. The queen stepped closer and took Ebere's measure. The girl's humble attire and nervous eyes, the dignity in the way she held herself despite obvious fear. Ebere summoned her courage and greeted them softly. "Your Majesties, I am honored to meet you." She kept her eyes lowered respectfully. The king let out a gentle laugh, putting Ebere at ease. "So, this is the mystery bride who stole away my son's heart." His tone was kind. "Rise, my dear, you are welcome." Nnenna nodded, a small smile forming. "Yes, welcome, Ebere." She took Ebere's hand in hers. "We did not expect Ozonna to return with a wife, but we trust his judgment. If you have won his heart, then you already have a place in ours." Her words and warm touch made tears spring to Ebere's eyes, but these were happy tears of relief. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Ebere said, voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I will do my best to honor him and this family." The queen gently wiped a tear from Ebere's cheek like a mother would. "You must both be exhausted. Come, let's get you settled." The king clapped his hands and servants sprang into action. They guided Ebere and Ozana into the palace. Ebere looked around in wonder as they passed through open courtyards decorated with carvings and royal emblems. One hall had tall wooden pillars etched with images of the kingdom's history. They passed by curious palace heads and guards, all of whom bowed as the prince and the new lady passed. Ebere felt a flush of bashfulness at being the object of so much respect. They were led to Ozana's chambers, spacious rooms that opened to a veranda overlooking a lotus pond. Ebere had never seen such comfort. A large carved bed with soft mats and woven blankets, ornate lamps, and trays with fruit and cooled wine already waiting. By now, the reality had begun to sink in for Ebere. This was her new environment. It was both exciting and overwhelming. Sensing her fatigue, Ozana turned to the servant. "Please, have a bath drawn for my wife and arrange some suitable clothes for her," he instructed. The servant bowed and left swiftly to fulfill the orders. He then turned to Ebere, who stood in the middle of the fine room, looking a little lost. "Are you alright?" he asked softly. She managed a small laugh at the repeated question. "I think so," she said. "This is also much to take in. A day ago, I was sleeping at hut, and now," she gestured at the beautiful room and her lavish surroundings. Ozana stepped closer and took both her hands. "Now you are home," he said gently. "I'm sorry it happened so suddenly. I intended to prepare you, but events overtook my plans." Ebere squeezed his hands back. "Don't apologize," she said, her eyes earnest. "I understand why you did what you did, and I meant what I said. I love the man I married, title or not. I only worry, will I truly fit in here? I don't know the ways of courts or royalty." Ozana smiled. "You have something more important than any court training. You have a pure heart and wisdom beyond your years. My parents already see it. The rest will come with time, and I will be by your side through it all." He reached up and brushed back a strand of her hair, a tender gesture that made her heart skip. "We will do this together," he assured. A servant returned to inform them that a bath was ready. They had prepared a warm bath with flower petals in a grand copper basin behind a screen. The servant also brought a gown, an elegant yet simple dress in deep blue silk, embroidered with gold patterns along the hem. Ebere's eyes widened at the beautiful garment, and she touched it hesitantly. "For you, madam," the servant said politely. "The queen thought this would suit you for now, until a full wardrobe is made." Ebere thanked them and allowed herself to be led to the bath chamber. She parted from Ozana with a shy glance, still adjusting to being assisted by attendants. As she bathed, the warm water easing her travel soreness. She thought back to her last night in Akudo's hut, feeling scared of the future. Who could have imagined that future would lead here? After bathing, Ebere donned the blue gown. The fabric felt soft and luxurious on her skin, so unlike the coarse cotton she was used to. A maid helped to comb and plait her hair neatly, adorning it with a simple gold pin. When she finally looked at her reflection in a polished bronze mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a lady of the court. Stepping out onto the veranda, she found Ozana waiting. He had also changed, now dressed in a princely robe of deep purple with a gold trim, which accentuated his noble bearing. Yet, his smile was the same one that had warmed her in their little hut. He extended his arm, and she looked hers through it, feeling a mix of pride and affection. Together, they went to the king's dining hall, where a late meal was arranged despite the hour. King Ifechi insisted on formally welcoming his son and new daughter-in-law at the table, which could seat dozens. A smaller setting had been prepared for an intimate family dinner. The king sat at the head, and Kweninoma, Ozana and Ebere close by. A few high-ranking chiefs and their wives had also been invited on short notice, eager to meet the bride. To Ebere's relief, the atmosphere was friendly. The king asked Ebere gentle questions about her upbringing and parents. She answered respectfully, admitting her father was a simple farmer. She tactfully did not delve into the cruelty of her kudo, only saying she was raised in a village household. The king nodded thoughtfully, and one of the chiefs commented that many great queens and legends had come from humble origins. Queen Nena turned to the king with a smile and said softly, truly, as the elders say, a child who washes her hands well dine with the kings. Ebere has shown herself worthy through her character, and now she dines with us as family. Hearing those words, Ebere felt a rush of emotion. She remembered her father's proverb and realized it had come true in the most literal way. Ozonna caught her eye and smiled knowingly. If he too appreciated the wisdom of the saying, Ebere blinked away tears of gratitude. She couldn't help but feel her father's spirit in that moment, proud and vindicated. The dinner was sumptuous: spiced goat meat, pounded yam and rich vegetable stews, pepper soup and sweet cakes made of cocoyam flour and honey. Ebere ate slowly, mindful of manners, but Queen Nnenna kindly encouraged her to enjoy the food. Ozonna and his father spoke of news of the kingdom. Apparently trade had been good, but the king's health had given some cause for concern. However, he looked vigorous tonight, energized by his son's return. After dinner, King Ifechi announced that there would be a grand celebration and formal royal wedding ceremony in a few days. We must let the people of Umoji celebrate the return of the prince and welcome their new princess properly, he declared. Ebere flushed at being called a princess outright, but the king smiled at her kindly. You married quietly before, my dear, but now it is our honor to celebrate you officially. The queen agreed, already contemplating arrangement. We will prepare traditional attire and invite neighboring chiefs. The whole city will be invited to feast, he said. Ebere could hardly fathom such an event for her sake, but Ozonna rested a reassuring hand over hers under the table. That night, as they retired to their chambers, Ebere stood on the balcony with Ozonna, overlooking the palace gardens under the moonlight. Fireflies hovered above. It reminded her of the fireflies back home, and she realized with a pang that the humble farm had also been a home filled with love. Sensing her thoughts, Ozonna said softly, we can visit our farm often if you wish. It's still our home too, whenever we need peace and quiet. Ebere nodded gratefully and leaned against him. Yes, I would like that. She gazed at the stars, the same stars they used to watch from the hot doorsteps. In a gentle voice she said, I used to wonder if the stars saw me in that little village and knew what my future held. Now, I know that even when things seemed hopeless, the future holds something wonderful. Ozonna turned her to face him. His eyes shone with love. You're wonderful, Ebere. You changed my life as much as I changed yours. He chuckled softly, perhaps more, because you have taught me what true goodness is. You have reminded me of the values that matter. Ebere smiled, touching his cheek. We both learned from each other. I think destiny brought us together to teach us these things. They stayed arm in arm for a while, enjoying a peaceful silence. Tomorrow will bring new preparations and eventually the fanfare of a royal wedding. But for now, in the quiet of the night, they were simply a husband and wife, grateful for each other. Ebere closed her eyes and sent a silent prayer of thanks to the heaven. She was thankful for destiny, for patience rewarded, and for love discovered in the least expected way. A few days later, the kingdom of Umoji was alive with celebration. Word had spread quickly about Prince Ozonna's return with his bride from a faraway village. Curiosity and excitement filled the air. Market stalls were decorated with palm fronds and colorful clothes in honor of the festivities. Villagers streamed in from the countryside to witness the rare occasion of a royal wedding. In the palace, Ebere awoke early on the wedding day to the sound of drums and singing drifting in from the city. The celebration had already begun outside. She felt butterflies in her stomach as maid servants came in to help her prepare. They drew her a fragrant bath infused with herbs and assisted her in dressing in elaborate traditional attire chosen by the queen. Ebere's outfit was stunning. A beautiful two-piece wrapper made from rich deep green velvet fabric adorned with gold and intricate Igbo patterns. Around her waist, she wore a beaded belt, and multiple strands of coral beads graced her neck, a symbol of royalty and fertility. Her hair was arranged in an elegant upswept style with gold pins, and a coral bead tiara rested on her head. She wore bracelets of bronze and more coral on her wrist and ankles that jingled softly when she moved. When Ebere saw herself in the mirror, she hardly believed it. It was truly her reflection. Gone was the village girl in faded clothes. In her place stood a regal young woman dressed as a queen to be. Yet, her eyes were still the same gentle eyes of Ebere of Umike, and she reminded herself to remain humble and true to who she was. In another chamber, Ozonna donned his ceremonial attire. He wore a flowing robe of cream silk with gold embroidery, and a red traditional Igbo cap, opu, decorated with an eagle feather, signifying his status as a prince. A lion's head pendant hung on his chest, and he carried a carved walking staff that symbolized authority, though modestly for the pageantry of the day. By midday, the palace grounds were transformed into a festive arena. Canopies had been set up in the main courtyard to shade the numerous guests. Long tables overflowed with food, roast meat, yams, fish, fruits, and clay jugs of palm wine. Musicians played flutes, drums, ikolo, and udu, and intrigued instruments, filling the air with joyous music. The official ceremony began with a procession. Ebere was brought forward, flanked by 4 maidens of honor, daughters of chiefs, while Ozonna was accompanied by his closest cousins and friends. Out from the women in the crowd, as they shout, people marveled at the beautiful village-born bride and the proud prince. They performed the traditional marriage rite of Umoji. First came the wine carrying ceremony. Ebere, guided by the queen and an aunt, carried a wooden cup of palm wine in search of her groom amidst the crowd. It was a test of her ability to recognize and choose her husband publicly. Even though Ozonna sat prominently at the front with a grin on his face, Ebere played along, feigning a search among the guests, which elicited laughter and cheers. Finally, she approached Ozonna, who rose to receive her, smiling brightly. She knelt and offered him the cup with both hands. Ozonna accepted, drinking the wine in one go to signify his acceptance of her as his wife. When he finished, he helped her to her feet, and the crowd erupted in applause and joyful cheers. Next, the king's representative, an elder statesman, pronounced blessings upon the couple. He spoke of the importance of unity and understanding in marriage. A white chalk was used to draw a line on the ground, symbolizing the purity of their union, and the couple's hands were joined over it. The elder proclaimed, "What the gods have joined, let no man put asunder." Then came gifts from the people. Delegations from different villages of Umoji presented symbolic offerings, baskets of yams representing prosperity, bowls of clothes representing warmth and shelter, and even a pair of white doves symbolizing peace and love. To Ebere's astonishment, a small group from Umike had come, led by Mame Funanya, bearing a gift of locally woven fabric and carved wooden figures. They had traveled after hearing the news, determined to show support for their own who had become a princess. Ebere rushed to embrace the old woman and a few familiar faces. Tears of joy were shed as village women praised her, saying how proud her father's spirit must be. Akudo and Cheta were notably not present. Likely their shame kept them away, but Ebere did not dwell on that. She was surrounded by those who truly cared. After the formal rite, it was time for celebration and feasting. Ozonna and Ebere sat on ornately carved seats on a raised platform, essentially their thrones for the day. Receiving well wishes, the king declared a public feast, and everyone, from nobles to common folk, mingled in the palace grounds, enjoying the food and festivities. Dancers entertained the crowd. A troop of young men performed the athletic Atilogu dance, flipping and spinning to rapid drum beats, while women in bright attire danced gracefully to traditional songs. Ebere watched in delight, clapping along. At one point, some dancers invited her and Ozona to join a circle dance. Laughing, the couple stepped down and joined in a simple dance step, earning more cheers. Ebere's face glowed with happiness. Never had she imagined she would be dancing freely, surrounded by love and celebration, with a man who cherished her. As the afternoon sun began to lower, painting the sky in hues of gold, the festivities mellowed into a comfortable reading. Elders told stories and shared proverbs, imparting wisdom to the new couple. One elder, the king's brother, stood up with a horn of palm wine and announced in a booming, jovial voice, "I will tell you all a truth. When the gods write your destiny, not even kings can change it. See how our prince found his bride in a small village. Truly, wealth and status mean little without virtue. Our new princess taught us that character shines brighter than any gold." The guests raised their cups in agreement and drank to that. Ebere felt Ozona squeeze her hand as they listened. He leaned to whisper in her ear, "You see, everyone recognizes your worth now, as I did." She smiled and rested her head briefly against his shoulder, careful not to dislodge her coral tiara. As twilight fell, the first stars blinked into the sky. The wedding celebration moved into a final phase of Thanksgiving. The royal priest offered prayers for the couple, asking the ancestors to bless them with peace, children, and long life. Ebere and Ozona knelt together, heads bowed, as the priest circled them with incense and chalk, symbols of protection. Ebere felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over her, gratitude for how every step of her journey, no matter how painful, had led her to this moment. When the priest finished, Prince Ozona helped Ebere rise. In the soft dusk light, they looked at each other, recalling their journey, a secret meeting by a kola tree, a small hut by green hills, trials that tested their bond, and now the glow of lanterns in a palace courtyard celebrating their love. They exchanged vows quietly to each other, away from the crowd, promises spoken from the heart. "I will always cherish and respect you," Ozona said, holding both her hands in his. "And I will stand by you through any storm," Ebere replied, her eyes shining. "You gave up everything for me without knowing who I was," he said emotionally. "I am yours as you are mine for all our days, and I am grateful every day that it was you I married," she answered, tears of joy brimming as they sealed their words with a gentle kiss. Thunderous applause broke out when they kissed, as the guests took it as a signal of the ceremony's joyful culmination. The young people laughed, a bit embarrassed but blissful, and waved to the crowd, who whistled and cheered. Night settled in, and the stars above shone brilliantly, as if joining the celebration. Bonfires were lit, and the last of the dancers performed under their glow. Many guests would continue into the night, but the king and queen eventually ushered the newlyweds to retire and enjoy some rest after the long day. Hand in hand, Ebere and Prince Ozona left the festivities, walking towards their chambers through a path lined with flowering bushes. In the quiet of the corridor, beyond the noise, they paused and looked at each other under the soft glow of an oil lamp. Both were filled with an indescribable joy. Ebere thought back to the timid girl scrubbing floors in Umike, unsure of what her future held. She remembered enduring cruelty, whispering prayers at her father's grave, and accepting a marriage she thought would doom her. Now, here she was, not only a princess, but truly happy and loved. Life had taken a new turn, as unpredictable as a river's path. Ozona gently touched her cheek, as if also marveling that this was all real. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. "Our journey ahead, we will face it together, as we always have." Ebere nodded. "Together," she echoed. Her heart was full. She silently vowed to be a compassionate princess to her new people, to honor the faith placed in her, and she vowed to remain the kind of person her father would be proud of, humble, kind, and true. As they stepped into their chambers, Ebere looked once more at the starry night sky. The same stars that once witnessed her tears of sorrow now witnessed her tears of joy. In that moment, she understood fully the lesson her father had taught her and the journey she had undergone. Destiny may be delayed, but it can never be denied. Patience and virtue will always find their reward. Prince Ozona and Princess Ebere lived out that truth. Their story, from a small village hut to a grand royal palace, would be told for generations as a testament that true character shines brighter than wealth or title. Under the watchful eyes of the ancestors and the twinkling stars, their hearts swell with gratitude and hope for the future. And as husband and wife, they close the chapter of this day, looking forward to dawn and the many days of love to come. Moral lesson: true worth is measured by character, not by riches or titles. Ebere's kindness, patience, and loyalty, shown when she believed she had married a poor farmer, became the keys that opened the palace, proving that love built on respect survives every hardship. Akudo and Cheta's envy teaches that cruelty brings shame, while humility lifts the head high. As the elders say, a child who washes her hands will dine with kings, and patience has victory. The good things of life come to those who wait. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about Ebere and Ozona on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V, and do not forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.